Welcome back to the World Staffing Summit and another very interesting fireside chat conversation that I will have with a very, very special guest. He is the VP of KellyX Digital Innovation Lab, and I'm super excited to welcome Tim Oliver Pröhm here to the World Staffing Summit. Welcome, Tim.
Hey, thank you, Jan. And thank you so much for having me. Honestly, great event, great speaker lineup. I'm really honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Tim. So, I'm super interested to talk to staffing leaders these days and hear about, their challenges and their problems and what is on top of their mind for the industry. Before we dive in, and I know, on your LinkedIn, it says that you are building essentially a new methodology that yields 10x impact on our industry and not just 10% improvement. So I'm super excited to learn more about your thoughts when it comes to that. But before we dive into some questions, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey in the staffing industry. I know you've been around in the industry for a while, so maybe you can tell the audience, a little bit about your background.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, it's my 20th year in the industry. I started kind of like in 2002 in Germany, working for a kind of like staffing company called DIS, which was eventually acquired by the Adecco Group. And I started as a branch manager, and I kind of like entered the industry kind of like by accident. Honestly, I was kind of like looking for a new job. It was kind of like 2002 was a depression after 9/11. Everything broke down, and I kind of like went to the staffing branch. And then basically a recruiter came in and said, "Hey, I'm so sorry. Everything is a bit upside down because our branch manager just quit." And I'm like, that's an interesting thing. So I went back home. I looked at the kind of like at the job description, which had been published kind of like a day later, and I applied and I got the job. And then kind of like as everybody, I think in the staffing industry, I kind of like by accident kind of like joined the industry, and then started as a branch manager, really doing everything from recruiting to selling to really going door to door to acquire new customers here in northern Germany, where I live. Eventually got promoted, focused on large account sales, kind of like was managing the outsourcing kind of like business for the Adecco Group, which is now known as Pontoon. And then kind of like after 13 years, left Adecco, worked as an independent consultant and focused on technology implementation, digital strategy. And that's then when Kelly found me and hired me to kind of like rebuild or kind of like redesign the RPO strategy, kind of like which I did for kind of like 2 years. And then eventually I kind of like moved into a product development role where I developed net new digital solutions, working with a lot of different technology vendors, working with our Kelly Innovation Fund to really make sure that I identify kind of like new tools, new kind of like technologies that allow us to find candidates better, to serve our clients better. Yeah, and this is where I am today. And now kind of like the latest kind of like role that I took during your first KellyX, kind of like a more formalized incubator that we just developed. And yeah, many more years in front of me. Very excited, but industry certainly has changed over the last 20 years. Definitely tell.
Absolutely, yeah, and I'm super excited also to learn more about KellyX Digital, the innovation lab. I know that's a fairly new initiative as far as I understand, but maybe you can give us a little bit more overview about it. Is it really an incubation lab for technologies that you'll be breeding for the industry and offer others, or is it just more for internal technologies and innovations? Tell us more about this initiative.
Yeah, so it's a combination. So kind of like in the past, when you think about how staffing organizations kind of like usually approach kind of like technology, you kind of like gather requirements. For example, you want to buy a new front office system. So you gather requirements, you talk to a lot of different stakeholders, you identify your processes, you think about process optimization, and then you go to the vendor, and then basically the vendor implements something, and it's going to take 12 months, 18 months, 24, whatever it is, 5 years in large organizations. And what we've realized is that kind of like on our customer side, but also on the talent side, there's an appetite for innovation. A lot of our customers come to us and say, hey, kind of like, what's the latest and greatest, and how can we benefit from all these different technologies that are emerging out there? Because realistically, when you think about the HR tech market, there are several thousand startups that offer solutions, and a lot of buyers are overwhelmed. Sure. So basically, kind of like one of the core kind of like challenges we had is to say, okay, how can we make sure we have a good understanding on the market? So how can we track what's happening in the startup market? How can we make sure we assess and identify new technologies kind of like before kind of like our clients and also before our competitors? And how can we make sure we validate that they are really delivering what they're promising they be delivering. And that's basically kind of like where that incubation process kind of like then was developed, something we've been following for a couple of years now, where we say, hey, what are the use cases? Let's spend some budget. Let's kind of like identify the opportunities that this technology brings. And then after we've validated that it's working, kind of like we can go out and serve it to our clients. The other aspect, and you also touched that, is kind of like what are the net new kind of like solutions. I'll give you an example. Kind of like we recently completed an exercise where we went kind of like through an analysis of the mega trends. Because the question for me personally is kind of like what's going to happen in 2030, 2035? Because that's what my leadership asks for me. Kind of like what do we need today as a Kelly organization to be successful in 2035? How will candidates interact with staffing agencies? How will customers interact with staffing agencies? How are things like a Siri-like experience going to impact how candidates kind of like interact with us as an organization? And kind of like in the KellyX approach, we're doing a lot of rapid prototyping to make sure that people have something tangible to see, to feel, to experience before we go out and make an investment decision. So honestly, kind of like a lot of blue sky thinking, a lot of playing around with mock-ups, and really applying lean startup methodology where we gather a lot of feedback from different stakeholder groups just to make sure that we're on the right path.
Great. And do you build this essentially teams internally? So you basically gather groups that are prototyping specific products, or do you also invest and bring in external companies to come in into this innovation lab and work together with you?
Exactly. So I think the one thing kind of like most staffing organizations understand and recognize at some point is that we are not a software company. So we have a great IT organization. We have great people with digital skill sets, but we don't have 150 coders sitting somewhere that could build net new technology. So kind of like what we're doing is we have a core team, kind of like things. We can develop things on our own platforms. We use a lot of different technologies. We have a lot of development resources that can configure technology, which is, by the way, for me personally, the better way for the staffing industry, kind of like to move technology, kind of like innovation forward. And then we partner with a lot of different companies, can be grown-up companies, can be startups, to make sure that kind of like they get insight from what we are doing, but they have like the development muscle that we don't have and don't want to build, just because that's not our core competency. So it's like a mix of kind of like what you said.
Yeah. And there was an interesting point that you touched, 2030, 2035, how will the staffing experience look like? How will clients or how will candidates interact? What will be the role of the recruiter? What are your thoughts on this? Do you have specific predictions that you can make? I know this is very broad, but how do you envision the industry, and how do you envision the role of both the recruiter and the interaction of clients and candidates over the next couple of years?
So I honestly feel that there's going to be massive changes ahead of us, and it's always tempting to kind of like say like, oh, everything's going to change, so everything's going to be kind of like different. But I think the staffing industry is ripe for disruption. And I'm really surprised that none of the big digital players like the Googles or the Facebooks have really approached that space, just because it's a $450 billion kind of like business. It's really kind of like offers good margins for digital players. So I feel that the staffing organizations kind of like will have to change, just because there's a different expectation when it comes to the experience. So think about a candidate that is ordering something on Amazon, or kind of like having a WhatsApp or text message exchange with their kind of like cell phone provider. It's a staffing organization or staffing industry. Very often we don't offer that. So that's kind of like something that customers and talent will expect. From a customer perspective, pretty much the same thing. I think that the existing staffing process that we have is not sustainable. The reason is that kind of like when you think about a traditional staffing process, so I want to hire somebody through a contingent kind of like staffing agency. I call the branch, or I kind of like post something in my vendor management system. It gets distributed to the suppliers. They look in their pools, they post job ads, or they kind of like source people on LinkedIn. And then a couple days later, they come back. So think about a similar experience on Amazon. I want to buy a pair of sneakers. I kind of like go to Amazon. I say, hey, this is the specifics of size 12, black and red and whatever it is. And then a couple of days later, somebody from Amazon comes back and sends me 5 recommendations. Hey, here's one from Nike, here's one from Adidas. So that's not sustainable. And I think kind of like everything kind of like that's going to happen is going to be much more aligned to what we're already starting to see in the human cloud space. Because when you go to platforms like Freelancer, Upwork, 99 Designs, like all the big players, they provide something that hiring managers probably haven't recognized they want, but they will want it at some point in time, because that is instant gratification. Go to the platform, you look for talent, it pops up 150 profiles, and it gives the hiring manager the perceived kind of like option of choice. And I think that is something that as a staffing industry, kind of like we need to be better at. We were too slow. And I think if we're not accelerating, then we're going to have a problem. We're just going to be irrelevant at some point in time.
I agree. And I think that also comes back to, automation, and how can I create this automated process that will help me to create this pool of candidates that are available. We've seen often in the past, there's been a couple attempts to build recruiter marketplaces and staffing agency marketplaces where the process was pretty similar. Like you post a job, some recruiters or agencies will see it, some will respond, some will not, and then it takes a couple of days for anything to happen, right? But I think a big part of that is that often the staffing company does not know who is currently available. The automation is not there on their side in their applicant tracking system. The redeployment of candidates that are on assignment on a contingent basis is not great yet. So I think improvements on that side will make this entire shift to this instant gratification for the clients super important.
Absolutely.
So when you look at, we talked a little bit about clients, and we talked a little bit about candidate experience also. What do you think about the recruiter? I know that, over the last 5 to 10 years, people are talking about AI and the recruiters disappearing and, a recruiter-less process. What is your take on that? Do you see it be, a mix of tech and human touch, or do you see it more human touch than tech? What is your take on it?
So I think it's really depending on the roles you're sourcing and recruiting for. So kind of like I'll give you an example. Kind of like a lot of people say like, hey, you can't do a recruiterless sourcing or recruiting process. And honestly, and I think you can for certain roles. So I'll give you an example. Kind of like we just kind of like last night went live with a program in the United States with a kind of like large customer of Kelly, and they want to hire 600 people in a certain region in the US, and they kind of like struggle with their traditional processes just because there's high competition for blue collar talent in that space, and the traditional processes kind of like we were able to apply was not fast enough for what we wanted to do. So basically kind of like we took a technical solution that we had built for the RPO space for a high volume hiring approach, and kind of like went live last night, pushed a lot of social media campaigns. Basically, kind of like fairly straightforward process. People see the ad, they have offline flyers, they text a keyword, they receive a link to a mobile optimized apply page, they apply, they kind of like respond to a couple of knockout questions. We have some light AI that's actually kind of like assessing the response to the questions. And then kind of like a couple minutes later, they can self-schedule the interview. So I think we had like within the first, I think like 30 minutes, we had like 20 people apply, and they went through kind of like the first process step until the kind of like scheduling process within kind of like 4 to 5 minutes. I think it's like 4 minutes 50 on average. Yeah. And I think that is kind of like the speed you kind of like need to think about going forward. And obviously it's a blue collar environment, so the limit, the number of questions is limited. You understand if somebody can do the job or if they can't. So I think in these high volume solutions, that's going to be kind of like something that we're going to see. For kind of like, I don't know, kind of like IT, engineering, all this stuff, I don't think so. I think the role of the recruiter will definitely change, and it will much more be focused on the relationship building. Because the one thing that we're traditionally bad at, and I think the one thing that customers are very bad at, is really selling contingent job opportunities to candidates.
Yeah.
And we always had an abundance of candidates in the US, in Europe, and we always said like, hey, staffing is a commodity. A lot of buyers thought about that. And I think this is not the case anymore, because you really need to think about why your job is relevant and kind of like enriching for that contingent talent. So the experience is going to be more important. And I think the recruiter is so key when it comes to providing a great experience to the candidate, in addition, obviously, to the technical touch points, the digital touch points that every candidate has, but it needs to work in tandem. So that's kind of like my take on that.
Yeah, great. And I think a good combination of the tech and the human touch, but there's also the brand aspect. How important is brand for you? If you look across the staffing industry, there is some very modern new providers that created very great brands, in my opinion, both for being able to attract candidates with a specific niche. A great example I always like to mention is the Mom Project in the US, that has a very great brand, very specific to to target their audience, and there's a few others. I have a conversation with Frederick from ZenJob later today, also a great brand in Germany. What is your take on that? Do you think staffing companies need to step up their game in terms of how they present themselves, and do you think they need to go deeper into a niche or be more generalists? What is your take on that?
So honestly, I feel that everybody that touches contingent talent kind of like needs to focus more on branding. Staffing industry for sure has been kind of like a very saturated market. You have a lot of players that have been in the market for many, many years. Kelly has been on the market for 75 years. And kind of like the overall messaging kind of like stayed the same for many, many years. We have the jobs, kind of like we have entry-level jobs for people who don't find work anywhere else. And I think this is something where kind of like new providers have an opportunity to approach everything with a fresher look, with a fresher design, and also with a fresher and updated experience. I think kind of like the traditional staffing companies, us included, kind of like understand that and kind of like know that we need to provide kind of like better branding, more ambitious experience expectations for ourselves. But so do the clients. And I think that is kind of like one of the biggest realizations that I had. I'll give you an example. Kind of like a couple of years ago, we launched a new solution around what we call direct sourcing, which has been one of the biggest topics in the industry for many years. A lot of customers, they say, hey, why not just post contingent jobs on our career page? People will come by, people will apply, and then we just kind of like employ them via a payroll provider versus the staffing kind of like agency. And then we kind of like save a couple of percentages, and it's going to be great savings, all good. And kind of like all of the self-managed programs I've seen so far have not been successful. And one of the core reasons is like, first, like how do candidates find contingent jobs? I mean, a simple Google Trends like search would have like shown them that like nobody's looking for contingent jobs with their company. But the other thing is, I think nobody understands that there is the need for a contingent value proposition. Because we all talk about the employee value proposition, about kind of like the social benefits, about kind of like the cafeteria, all the great things that we provide for full-time talent. But if you're a good contractor, if you're a good contingent worker, why do you want to work in that organization? What are the benefits? And the majority of companies I see out there in the market using, they don't do that at all. They still treat them as a commodity. So I know lengthy response. I think from a branding perspective, there's definitely room for more. I think the industry needs to be bolder, needs to develop different kind of like in more value propositions, also specific to the individual job seeker types they're working with, because otherwise we're going to be irrelevant. That's just the harsh reality of where we operate today.
And do you think the topic of direct sourcing, and I know it's a buzzword over the last 1.5 to 2 years that basically is all over the place, and everybody is trying to create a direct sourcing program. Is that a threat for a traditional staffing company or an opportunity?
So I don't think it's a threat yet. And the reason is that a lot of companies are doing it wrong. I think it has the potential to grow, because realistically, when you think about, as I said earlier, how these programs have started, you post contingent jobs, you hope for people to apply, there's like zero traffic. People don't apply, and if they applied, as we discussed earlier, you have no idea if the person is still kind of like interested in your job. Kind of like the moment they applied, it's becoming historical data. They might have updated the resume. You don't know about that. And that's basically why kind of like the expectations kind of like organizations have are very, very often kind of like fulfilled. So I feel that there are ways to do it better from a digital perspective. I'm probably biased just because we offer that in full disclosure as a service to our kind of like Kelly OCG, kind of like a lot of MSP clients. But I think the thing that kind of like people need to understand is that there's no way that candidates will automatically kind of like join your talent pool, your talent community, and then go back to a portal, update their data on a regular basis, and you just tap in when you need it. There's a lot of kind of like sweat and tears involved in the sourcing process, where you need new tools. You need to make sure people stay engaged. You need to bring kind of like update or resume update technology in, AI sourcing technology, just to make sure the kind of like pool stays relevant. And kind of like the one thing, there's kind of like a term that some of our competitors are using. I actually like that very much. The concept of the talent river versus the talent pool, because the pool is very, very often stale and stagnant. So you constantly need to bring new talent in. You constantly need to make sure that records are updated. If that is done, I think direct sourcing is a kind of like good approach, not for all roles, but for kind of like good percentage of roles that a customer is sourcing for. So this will become more relevant in the future. If it's a threat, I'm not sure. Like we'll see how the organizations adopt kind of like the new processes. But as it is, I think there's definitely room for improvement and not so much to worry about at this point.
Got it. And I agree. I think, that also goes back a little bit to the employer brand, right? If you have a good employer brand, you'll get inbound candidates more and more, and you can sort of probably build a better direct sourcing program. Maybe if your brand is not as strong, you still need this curation aspect, which again leads back to the staffing company being more present than just a pure, direct sourcing technology. So yeah, but thanks for those insights. Maybe we shift gears a little bit about and talk about markets. I know we are both in Europe. I'm sitting here in Vienna. You're in Germany, but both of us, we work a lot with the US. So we've been traveling to the US over the last years and working in the US market. What is your take on the state of the HR tech market in Europe? Is it far behind the US in terms of innovation? Do you see new players coming up now in the last couple of years that are, that can basically catch up with what's happening in the US? What is your take on that?
So honestly, I think there's a vibrant startup market in Europe. You see kind of like one of the biggest success stories, obviously Personio, kind of like becoming a unicorn now. I mean, everybody loves that these stories. I think the advantage that startups and new technologies in the US have is that the market is bigger. Kind of like when you think about it, there's 320 million kind of like people in the United States. You have a very, very kind of like very harmonious market, so to speak. So everybody's speaking the same language, everybody's operating under the same legal kind of like constraints, and then it's easier for you to scale if you're in the US, just because kind of like the budgets are there, the buyers are open, and then basically you have like a one kind of like marketplace. Whereas in Europe, obviously, kind of like you probably have Germany, France, UK as one of the largest kind of like economies there, but it still needs to be customized. And I think that's one of the core issues you have if you go kind of like to a German company. If you go to a French company and say, hey, sorry, our tool is only available in English, you're going to have a problem. And that's basically kind of like something where I believe that kind of like multinational kind of like startups that focus on the US market kind of like have kind of like an opportunity to scale kind of like
faster. Yeah.
The other thing that I always recognize is a lot of people I know complain about GDPR. And they're like, yeah, like we can't do that. Data privacy is kind of like killing us, and it's so much better in the US. What a lot of people don't realize is that in the US, there's also legislation that's becoming more similar to what we're seeing in the European Union with GDPR. So the limitations are kind of like almost the same. And I also feel that data privacy is a good thing. So kind of like if you're a European startup, that is something that you can use to your advantage, because complying with data privacy will become a major topic going forward, no matter which geography you work on. So I think that kind of like as a European kind of like startup organization, you can do much more. You can really kind of like leverage your kind of like expertise on that topic and then kind of like aggressively push that forward. The one other thing that I kind of like where I see a difference is that kind of like in general, kind of like companies in the US are more open.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of like something I've learned. They understand, hey, I need to get the job done. I need to fill roles. I need to kind of like find talent. Hey, we haven't tried that. Sounds promising. Okay. Kind of like tell me, does it work? Show me, does it work? Okay. Whereas in Europe, very, very often when kind of like we talk to clients, also in the past, it was like, okay, kind of like I need 5 case studies. So I need 7 customers from my specific industry that source these specific candidate profiles and kind of like show me how you were successful, kind of like helping them filling the role, because nobody wants to kind of like take any risk, which is kind of like understandable, because kind of like then obviously kind of like with risk, there's always not always reward. But the thing is that kind of like in the US, people are more open and accept failure a bit more. They say, hey, let's do a pilot, didn't work. These were the reasons. Okay, boom, we burned a couple of dollars, but in general, that's not going to change the overall direction. So I think that's like the mentality piece that's also coming into play when you kind of like take a look at it from a European perspective.
I like that. Yeah, I agree. I think, you know, what we've seen also with our business when we moved to the US in 2017 here from Austria, it was just the openness. You know, the people are more open to try things out, also to say no real quick versus, you know, holding you off or pushing you back. And I think that's where maybe the European buyers could also, you know, be more open to just try things out. So I think that's definitely a very interesting perspective. I know that we only have a couple more minutes left here. It's a super interesting conversation. Time is flying by like crazy. You know, we were talking a little bit about technology. I'm curious, just do you have any, I know you mentioned Personio, any other favorite tools, and not to make any promotion here, but just, you know, curious what type of technologies you're currently using and what do you see is upcoming that you know, follow over the last like 1 or 2 years that is interesting to you?
Yeah, so I'm not going to call out any vendors, because I think there's two things that are kind of like interesting for me in general, and that might also be interesting for anybody in the audience. So kind of like one toolkit I use a lot also for prototyping, Microsoft Power Platform. So kind of like we do a lot of work on Microsoft Power Automate, Microsoft Power Apps, and kind of like one of the favorite tools I use is Microsoft Power Virtual Agents, which actually, for those of you kind of like here in the audience who don't know it, it's basically kind of like a toolkit to build your own chatbots. And kind of like this is something that we're using a lot, among other tools, to really rapidly mock up solutions and to kind of like showcase how kind of like a voice-based AI interaction or natural language processing could look like. So I think that's kind of like something that I use a lot, because technology has become so much more affordable in the past. When you think about kind of like 4 or 5 years ago, you needed to have a vendor. They needed to kind of like hard code specific commands into a chatbot. And now everything is much more accessible, and there's no excuse for any staffing organization to not explore use cases in that kind of like AI or automation kind of like arena. That's kind of like the one thing that I use a lot. And then the other thing, it's also not a traditional HR technology, but kind of like I'm a big fan of Miro. I'm not sure if you use that. It's basically an online collaboration tool that goes far beyond the traditional kind of like features that a typical whiteboard kind of like might have. And I think this is something that really changed also how kind of like we collaborate, kind of like across time zones, kind of like across company borders. We use it for a lot of kind of like workshops with clients. And I think that online collaboration is becoming such an important thing, because I feel that even if COVID, like when COVID is over at some point in time, we're not going to go back to the office structures we had in place before COVID. And I think this is something where kind of like online collaboration, being creative, developing new solutions will stay relevant across kind of like the virtual world. And I think this is why kind of like tools like that are going to be super important for every organization to kind of like learn and understand and then utilize.
Agree. We use Miro as well. It's definitely great to help us collaborate remotely all over the world. So yeah, thanks for those insights. We're going to the end of our session. Are you ready for a couple rapid fire questions?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Cool, awesome. Tim, permanent or contingent?
Contingent. Flexible is beautiful. I mean, that's the thing.
Got it. Build or partner?
Partner.
Partner. Very good. Touch or tech?
Touch.
Read or watch?
Watch.
What's the latest you've watched? Netflix or any other platforms?
Yeah, Disney Plus, actually.
Watched Plus, okay, yeah.
Like Eternals on the weekend, so a pretty cool movie, actually.
Okay, cool. Tim, it was a pleasure to have this conversation with you.
Yes,
extremely great insights. I hope the audience enjoyed that. Yeah, I'm looking forward to staying in touch with you and catch up soon. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining this session. If you have questions, you can also put them onto the chat. We'll be able to answer them here. Unfortunately, we're running out of time already today. Yeah, stick around for the conference. We have great content coming up today and on Thursday and on Friday. So I'll see you later. And thank you so much again, Tim. See you soon.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks.